So welcome to Agent Rising Real Estate School, Unit 10, Real Estate Agency. Okay, so in this, to maximize this unit, you're going to have your book opened to the unit. You're going to have your recorder ready and you're going to record it. So slideshow, book, and your recorder. Those are the three things that go together, okay, to maximize it. That way you can listen in the car to your audios or wherever you are, okay? Your forum is on agentrising.com, and I will check them nightly, starting tonight. Okay, so real estate agency. The relationship between a real estate professional and the parties involved in the real estate transaction is not a simple one. A real estate professional can represent a client as an agent, and the real estate professional acts as a fiduciary. So my friend always says, like, think of fiduciary, if you're their fiduciary, like you're Fido the dog fighting for them. Okay, so that's how you can tell if you're giving them fiduciary, if you're protecting them. It is subject to a wide range of legal and ethical requirements designed to protect the seller, the buyer, and the transaction itself. There are other agency relationships in the real estate business, including that of the sales associate to the employing broker, okay? So agency is, who can look in the green book and tell me how many questions are on agency? Agency is an important one. And agency is the one that they've kind of changed around a little bit. So this is a good chapter to know. In my opinion, it's also a pretty interesting chapter. Okay, so what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to explain agency concepts and terminology, explain the difference between express and implied agency, define the types of agency and identify which, if any, are involved in real estate practice, describe and explain an agent's duties to third-party customers, explaining regarding misstatements, misrepresentation, and potential fraud. Okay, so here are our key terms. All right, we've got agency, agent, buyer representation agreement, buyer's agent, client, customer, designated agency, designated agent, dual agency, express agency, express agreement, fiduciary, fiduciary relationship, fraud, general agent, implied agreement, latent defect, law of agency, listing agreement, negligent misrepresentation, non-agent, principal, puffing, single agency, special agent, transaction broker, and universal agent. So there's a lot of words, a lot of definitions in this one, okay? So the history of of agency is what? So we got common law. So it goes back to basically common law, where they talk about, I think like even back to like the feudal times or something, right? What does it say, Hoyt?
The overview or the history, agency relationship and real estate transactions are governed by three kinds of law: common law, statutory law, and administrative law.
Okay, so what's common law? Common law is?
Common law, the rules established by tradition and court decisions.
Okay, so that's common law. Statutory law is?
The laws enacted by the legislature and
administrative law?
Administrative law, the rules and regulations created by real estate commissions and departments as authorized by the legislation.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think it's not going to tell us here, I guess. The history of agency goes back to, I think, as I said, in something I read about like it goes back to like feudal times and common law, which kind of was established back, I don't know. Anyway.
Half a century.
Okay, there we go. I thought it was in there. I was sinking there. Okay, so the law of agency, the chapter definitions. The law of agency. What is the law of agency? Kim, what does it say?
Wasn't even looking up.
I wasn't looking up. She goes, I was not giving you eye contact. Not fair.
Whether expressed in the common law or statutes, typically includes the following definitions, and then there's agent, principal, agency, fiduciary, client, customer, non-agent.
Okay. Okay. All right. So those are all the things that they listed here. Okay. So I'm going to just go through them because I think it's important. An agent is a person that is working with somebody. So that's a pretty broad definition. What does it say in there for your definition? It says,
the individual who is authorized and consents to represent the interest of another person in dealings with a third person. Sell associates of real estate broker, act as agents, representatives of the broker. In a real estate transaction, the firm's broker may be the agent of a client and will share the responsibility with the sales associates who work for the firm. As agents of the broker, the sales associates thus have the same relationship to a client of the firm that the broker does. If the broker is an agent of a seller, for instance, a sales associate also acts as agent of the seller unless some other provision is made.
okay, awesome. All right, so the principal is, Trevor, I haven't heard you talk in a while. Give me the definition for principal.
Principal, the individual who hires the agent and delegates to that agent the responsibility of representing the principal's interests.
Okay, so the principal in this case would be who, the consumer? Yeah, okay. And then agency, Dennis, what does it say for agency? Is it the same definition as agent?
Agency, the fiduciary relationship between the principal and the agent by which the agent is authorized to represent the principal in one or more transactions.
Okay. All right, and so the fiduciary, Jim, what does it say about that?
The relationship in which the agent is held in a portion of special trust and confidence by the principal.
Okay, again, think about that dog always protecting, in this case, it would be protecting the principal, right? Because they're the agent for them. Okay, so, Sonia, what does it say about client?
Client, the principal in a real estate transaction for whom a real estate broker acts as agent. The term client is also used when a broker represents someone in a relationship other than an agency.
Okay. As opposed to customer. Russ, what does it say for customer?
Customer, the third party or non-represented consumer who is not a principal but for whom some level of service may be provided and who is entitled to fairness and honesty. The customer may be represented by a separate agent.
Okay. So, we're gonna talk about it a little bit more when we get into Massachusetts. Okay, what the difference for us is between a client and a customer and what we give each of those people. Most of the time, when you are an agent for a principal, they are your client, okay? So you have established that fiduciary responsibility with them. Okay, so most of the people you work with, you'll have a client relationship with, okay? A customer, on the other hand, would be someone who you have a decreased level of responsibility for. And I think you said, what, honesty and?
Fairness and honesty.
Fairness and honesty, okay, so you offer them fairness and honesty. Okay, a customer could be somebody else's client, like for example, if you are showing a house and they have a buyer's agent and you're talking to that person, you know, or whatever, you don't owe them those agency responsibilities, you have a customer relationship with them. The other time that we see a lot of customer relationship would be if you're the seller's agent and you show a buyer, like an unaccompanied buyer, and then you do not establish a client relationship with them, or a fiduciary relationship with them, you keep them as a customer. So actually, when Tim was telling my story, I was thinking he might have been a customer because of the way that went down, right? A customer would be so that the person does not have an agent. So I'll give you the scenario for that. You know, often we get a phone call, and they say, "Can I see your listing on 123 Main Street?" And you say, "Okay, great. You know, do you have a buyer's agent?" "No, I don't. I don't want representation. I just want you to show me the house." Okay, so they're coming unaccompanied to see your house. They've just told you they don't want representation, so you are not going to be entering into a dual relationship. Okay, you are not giving them client relationship. You're treating them like a customer. Okay, so you're showing them the house. And so you show them the house and you give them, because you have an agency responsibility to the seller, and you do not have one with them, you have to be really careful about the kinds of things that you communicate with them, okay? So they're called customers. Sometimes when someone's new, they call everybody a customer, and I'm like, no, client.
Do you still have to have them sign an agency
You do.
disclosure form?
In fact, you do, yes. She asked me and we'll talk about this, I don't know when, sometime in the next few days, about an agency disclosure form, which is a form that we show that we have every single person that we, first personal meeting with a person about a specific property. 2 criteria, no matter what, no matter when, other than open houses, that you have to do an agency disclosure for them and talk about this stuff, okay? So, you know, she had asked me if we still had to do them because they're, you know, so sometimes they're awkward and sometimes, you know, especially when you're new, unless you practice on your phone when you're driving, you will be uncomfortable having your first agency responsibility question, you know, actually, always, and even still sometimes. Like I met somebody out that in School Street in Marshfield where I have a listing, and they were unaccompanied, and I had my agency disclosure with me. I had not met them before. I didn't know them. They didn't really want me for an agent. I didn't really want them for one because they're looking for places in Marshfield, so I wanted them to be a customer. So I drew my line through the line that says, that goes on it, and I brought it with me and I talked to them about it. But I did not do it the first, it doesn't say you have to do it the first thing you meet them. I waited till I was inside the house in the kitchen.
That's why I thought maybe a customer was a different category, so they didn't have to.
You have to, well, you have to tell them they're your customer. So, and again, and I don't want to get off topic on this because this will come up a lot, but, okay, so you're showing a house, and actually, now that I think about it, I probably violated this too. They asked me what I thought about the price. Okay, now I'm representing the seller. So I'm answering that question about what I think about the price as if that seller's on my shoulder, as if that seller is talking to me, as if that seller's talking through me. So what would my seller say? And what do I have permission from my seller to say? You know, and in this particular case, I shared about a reverse mortgage and blah, blah, blah. And they're going like, oh, this house is totally not worth it. Now what I really wanted to say was, no, it ain't, you know. But you don't say that because I've got the seller, I'm speaking for the seller, and I can't say that, you know. So when they say, well, what do you know, so they're asking me for motivation and, you know, kind of like like strategy on how they could possibly get the house. I can't tell them. Like they're my customer, right? I'm not Fido to them. I'm not fighting for them. Okay, I'm fighting for my seller. Okay, so it gets tricky sometimes, but it's really important, and you will learn why. It's really important that you have these conversations and you're clear about this, because this is where you'll get into jackpots, and this is where you'll go to real estate jail, because this is it's really lonely in real estate jail. No, it's really important that you know it because and that you have these communications, because after the thing, when things go sour and you know and you're to blame for everything, you have to make sure you have very clear that you spelled things out and that you acted in your proper fiduciary. Okay, so this is a little bit what I'm talking about. An express agency means that I talked about it. I've said to you, okay, you are my customer, they're my clients, right? Or I said, I am representing you in a client fashion, or I am not representing you, okay? So again, because we like to sometimes skirt the issue because it's uncomfortable, we don't quite know what to say, you know, we stumble over our words because it really kind of needs to be changed a little bit, so it doesn't make total sense. So you don't express it, and so you show the house, you get to the house, right, the situation, you know, which is the most common one that the people don't know, right? So they call on the house, you get in there, and I look at the guy and I'm going like, he's definitely not a tester. I'm not going to go to real estate jail today because of him, because he's not going to go back to the, you know, mass.gov or you know, to the voter registration and tell him I didn't do an agency disclosure. So I'm just going to like sneak it by, and I look at him and I'm like, he's definitely not buying this house, so it doesn't really matter if I do it. So I'm just going to show him the house. He's going to go on his way. No harm, no foul, right? You know, I'm not going to say all those things, but that's what my brain's going to process. Or I get so confused, I get so confused, or I get so caught up in stuff, I forget it, okay? So either way, whatever happens, if I don't expressly tell him exactly what's happening, even if it's awkward, then I have violated the law, okay? And let's just say, in this particular case, I'm walking around, right? And we're looking over it, and the person says, you know what, I'll give you $300,000 cash for this. I'm like, shit, I haven't done an agency disclosure. I don't know how I'm representing them. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So now I have to backpedal. And I'm like, well, let's just talk about things first, you know? So the best bet is to make sure you get it in before those communications start. Because one of those thresholds I was telling you about, one of those thresholds is cost of fees or prices. How much will they take? How much do you think it's worth? How much do I think it's worth? Like if I say that to a buyer and I don't have a FIDO relationship with him, and even if I have them with both, and this is one of the things that a few people in here really hate, is, you know, if I have a dual relationship with both sides, then when they ask me about price, how am I supposed to answer that? Like which dog am I gonna like feed, you know? So anyways, it gets tricky. What you need to know for the test is that you need to have express agency, okay? You need to express who you're working for and how you're working for them. Implied agency is illegal, right? Implied agency is when we're walking around the house, right? And we don't have that conversation, right? I don't fill in that form with you. So I never said I was working for you. So we go and we put it in under agreement, and I'm calling you my customer, even though I never told you you were my customer. I just told myself you were my customer, right? So when we're working out the numbers, you say to me, can you go run down to town hall and get me the plot plan? I get in my car, I drive down to town hall, I get a plot plan. He's starting to think I'm his guy. Like he thinks I'm his agent, even though I'm the agent for her, right? But I'm helping him, I'm doing things for him. And so he thinks I'm for him. But she hired me. She's the person who I've done that agency disclosure with. He's just the person who put the deal together. But I never told him I was not his agent. He doesn't understand agency. People out on the streets do not understand the stuff. And you know what? They don't care about it until there's something wrong. So, okay, so we're all set. We get ready to closing. We find out that the lot line's not where it is. She says, well, how does he even have the plot plan anyways? And I say, oh, I gave it to him. You know, or whatever it was. This is a bad example. But so anyways, he goes, well, you're my guy. And I'm like, I never said I was your guy. But I implied it. My actions. I talked to him. I helped him. I did these things that agents do. But I didn't ever say that I was, implied dual agency is illegal. Not implied agency. Implied dual agency is illegal. Okay? So anyways, I've just really gotten myself in trouble because I'm afraid to have those conversations. So you really need to know these things. And I'll tell you who's best at doing these conversations. New people. Right? Because you guys are going to learn right as you get out there what you say, what you don't say. It's not confusing to you. You don't want to lose your job, and you don't want to get fined, and you don't want to get that person to hate you and go tell everybody how stupid you are. You know, and you know, you don't want to have that bad experience. So you want to do the right thing. Okay? So you have to have those things. Okay, so compensation, right? So we talked about this before. Compensation does not equal representation, okay? So and I'll use the example of someone in this room. So her client went and saw a house. Actually, her client went to an open house, I think, and then after the open house said that that person wanted representation from this agent in the office. So this person says, sure. So this agent says, even though they came, they said, sure, you can represent that person. That's fine, right? He has no plans on paying that person. And she's going, but of course I get paid. I'm the representative. Compensation does not equal representation. We all get paid from the sellers, right? But yet the buyer's agents all have that representation to them, okay? And compensation does not equal representation. And that was a crappy example I gave, but there'll be other ones that come up. Okay, so fiduciary responsibilities. So as an agent, and this says old car. This is also cold AC, like in your car, it's cold AC. You can learn it as you want. I learned it as old car. I call it old car, which is obedience, loyalty, disclosure of everything that I know, confidentiality of anything that you tell me, accountability of funds, and reasonable care and diligence. That's what you get with FIDO. right? That's what you get as your fiduciary. That's what your agent's supposed to give you. That's the kind of relationship you have, okay? So, I should actually say within the law. So, anyway, so that's what kind of agreement you have with a person when you have an agency agreement, okay? I don't think we talk about it this chapter. No, okay. So, any questions on that? Okay.
What, just went back to this agency, what if they refuse to sign?
There's a little box in the they don't have to sign. There's a little box in the bottom that you can say that they refuse to sign it. And actually, back to my Marshfield people the other day, after I showed it to them and they had their hands in their pockets and they were like this or something, I checked it off. You know, I didn't I said, you know what, you don't need to sign this. I just need to go through it. I need to present it to you and I need to talk to you about it. Okay, so that was that. Okay, so they don't have to sign it. There's a box that they don't. You just have to say it.
Okay.
Okay, and you have to have the form in front of you. Or you should have the form in front of you. I don't know if you have to. So those of you for the old car, I talk about the old car all the time. Okay, that's how I remember it. Okay, so types of agency relationships. A general agent represents the principal in certain business matters generally. Okay, that could be your family attorney, right? Represents you when you have to do estate work. Who represents you when you have to do some legal work for maybe some house stuff, maybe some, you know, whatever. Like they represent you in a various kind of things. You know, a special agent represents the principal only for specific transactions, such as the sale of a house. So we're special agents. Just think of yourselves as like a James Bond. You know, you're a special agent. Okay? And then the last part is disclosure of agencies. Again, we are required to disclose the parties we represent. Okay? I've drilled this home, so I don't need to go into that again. Okay. So here we go. I knew it was going to come up. Single agency and dual agency. So single agency would be you represent one side. Seller agency or buyer, the seller side, the buyer side, or property management. Okay, you're a single agent. Okay? So let's go back to, you're going to go show the house, right? Or let's use a pure answer to this. You have a buyer that you've been working with for a long time, right? You have a buyer's agreement with them, and you're their exclusive buyer agent, and you've shown them 85 houses. You get a call for a new listing. You go and you take the listing. It's the perfect house for your buyer. Okay, in a situation, okay, you have the listing side, you took the listing, but you have this buyer that you've worked with forever. So in this case, you would, and this is like a pure case, there's a lot of muddy cases, but in this pure case, you would then have a dual relationship where you have this new listing you have that you're giving Fido to, and you've got this guy that you've shown 85 houses to, and you sure as hell am not giving him up because you've shown him 80 houses, and that's 80 times 2 hours is 160 hours times $0 an hour, and you want that $3,000 you're going to get from him, right? Well, maybe it's not only that. Maybe you really care where he lives. You probably do. Okay, so you definitely do. You don't even care about the money. You just want to see him happy with his family. Okay, right. Okay, so anyways. So now you say to them, and there's paperwork that gets you to have consent to dual agency when you take a listing and also when you take that buyer agreement. Okay, so when you're listing the house, you would say to that Mr. and Mrs. Seller, okay, I'm asking you during this for consent that I may have a buyer that would be perfect for this house. So in that case, I'd be a dual agent. Okay? And then you explain a little bit about what dual agency is, which I will in a second. Is that okay with you? Awesome. Great. Consent to it when they sign the paperwork. In your buyer agency agreement, you say the same thing. My buyer friend, I might get a listing that's perfect for you. Would you be okay with dual agency? Sure. Consent to dual agency. So you've got consent. That's the first piece you need. Okay? So now you actually go and you show the property. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what happens with dual agency. Okay, with dual agency, I just talked about that old car. Obedience. Okay, can you obey both of them completely? Not really. What if she says, get me down, well, I'm not gonna use money, because money, everyone always thinks it's about money. Say she says, I do not want to fix that furnace, right? Don't get me an offer that says that a furnace is gonna get fixed. He says, I'll buy that house, but that furnace better be fixed. How do you obey them both? You may not be able to obey them both, okay? You may be able to, but you may not be. That responsibility may be compromised. Loyalty. Generally speaking, you've had this, the seller, you go to their house, they call you, they say, can you do a market analysis with me? You do a CMA with them. You go there, you start this thing, you go through their house, you take pictures, you do the video, you send the stager over. Like you in this listing, in your listing agent have had this like long trail of activity, okay? And she's paying you. Your buyer calls on the ad in the real estate book, or drives by, or saw it on Zillow. And he says, I want to see that house. You're like scratching, trying to get him to sign that paperwork as you're going into the house, Maybe, you're not supposed to, but maybe that you have. So you don't have the same kind of loyalty to both of them. Although you've promised them both loyalty, right? Can you be completely 100% loyal to both of them in a dual agency situation? No, you can't. Okay, so OLD, disclosure. Let's do D and C together, disclosure and confidentiality. Okay, so when you sat down with them, you promised them complete disclosure of everything you know. That buyer that's coming to your house has a trunk at his house full of $100 bills, and he's going to buy that house with cash as soon as he likes it. You'd have to share that, right? Because that's disclosure. So now, if you have promised disclosure and you've promised confidentiality, and you've promised him disclosure and you've promised him confidentiality, how do you do that? You can't. These are the two big ones. No one really cares about obedience and loyalty. Not that much. You care a little bit, but you don't really care because it's not that big of a violation. But you can't stay confidential in full disclosure because you can't, right? So you keep your cloak of confidentiality and you disclose everything about the property, not about the people. So you make it about the transaction, not about the people. So now you have limited the amount of agency, how much bite you have as Fido, okay? Because now you encapsulate that disclosure, that confidentiality, okay? So now when you're talking dual agency, you don't make it sound like that's a very big deal because, we just encapsulate it and we tell them everything about the house. It becomes about the transaction and it becomes win-win. There's tons of good things to say about dual agency. And I know because I say them all the time because I love dual agency, right? But truthfully said, you can't, there's a couple people in this room who say like, I don't like it because I want to be a big biting Fido, So anyways, so you encapsulate the confidentiality and you make the full disclosure about the people. So now I'm going to go back here for a second. Okay, so we don't give a whole C, we don't give a whole O, we don't give a whole, let's go back to this, D or C. So now we're left with accountability and reasonable care and diligence. Okay, so you told me I'm going to give honesty, right? Honesty and fairness. So I'm still going to give honesty and fairness. I'll still account for their money, right, when I get it, because of course we always account for the money, right? And the last one is reasonable care and diligence, and I'll be reasonable. So I give them what they talk about is or far, or ha, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of different ways they say it. But basically, in dual agency, you are no longer that big biting Fido for them, okay? You're now, who are you going to be? What kind of animal are you going to be now? Like you're going to be like a nice Zen-like animal that's all about the transaction and all about everybody being reasonably happy and everybody kind of tying it together and making it work, okay? Which isn't so bad, but it's definitely not this, right? Any questions on that? So that's the disclosed part. The undisclosed part is when I'm a chicken, right? I don't want to talk about it. I have to tell him. I have to give him that service. He thinks I'm working for him because he's only known me, right? He doesn't know whatever else is going on. Something comes up that's a problem. He's like, wait a minute. I thought you were helping me. I thought you were on my side. What's going on? He doesn't even know that you're breaking the law, okay? You broke the law because you were afraid to talk about this, That's pretty much the only reason why. Or you thought that it would just kind of go by. Okay? And then designated agency is when we talked earlier about the two different kinds of ways that a company runs. They either run traditional, where everybody in the office represents that person. And this is why actually most offices that have any size don't do this. Or you're designated, where the supposedly, the way they say it, but that's not really the way it happens, is that the broker designates you for the seller and you for the buyer. And you guys both give your big biting, Fido old car, okay? And I would just kind of oversee it in my little Zen-like whatever animal we can't think of, all right? So that's kind of how that happens, okay? Now, the reality is that almost never does in this office anyways, does the broker really designate it out. Dave finds his listings, Michelle finds her buyers, okay? They find their own people, and then they're designated that way. The reason we don't do general is because if every listing in here was everybody's, and every buyer's was everybody's, we'd have a ton of dual. And by and large, we feel that when you can, that you should give that big biting Fido. Any questions on that? Okay. I kind of went off. You should be able to get continuing eds on this because I went into this a little deeply. Okay, termination of agency. How do you cancel agency? The first is completion of purpose. Okay, they buy the house, they sell the house. Although I will caution you, I would never, if someone told you something in confidence, or if there's something that's confidential, I would never disclose that confidentiality. Okay? Death, incapacity of either party. I have had people die, in the middle of a transaction, and so we're no longer their agent. Destruction of the property. Dave, you had a house burned down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that ceased his agency. Expiration of terms. Okay, so you had an agreement with them and it ended, right? And so that ended the agency agreement. Mutual agreement, right? You decided that you're going to go different ways. They decided they didn't want to list their house. They didn't want to sell their house anymore. I just went to book an appointment for a house that I've had on the market. And they said, I don't know, I've got college coming up. And I said, then let's cancel it. If you're not going to let me show it, if I can't sell it, then let me take my name off it. Excuse me. Breach of one of the parties. Okay? So if one of the parties breached their agreement, then you could seize that thing. And then operation of law, bankruptcy. Okay? So those are ways to terminate.
I'm not sure what you said.
I said, bring me some pizza, Nick. No, just kidding. All right, so customer level service. So back to our customer, right? So this is declaring that you are not helping that person in the agency responsibilities. Okay, you declare that they're customers too. Okay, don't half-ass your job. Okay, you give them reasonable care and skill, honest and fair dealing, and disclosure of material facts. Okay, so we talked about that. I'm killing a dead horse. I'm not going to do that. Okay, opinion versus fact. All right, so what's legal, what's not legal? Can I puff? Can I say, this is the nicest house ever?
Yes.
I can puff, although, right? I've had times that I've got into a house and they're like, this is not the nicest house ever, okay? But they can't, but there's nothing that they can say. I wasn't fraudulent. I didn't say, okay, so fraud would be when I misrepresent it, okay? And I say something that is not true. Okay, negligent misrepresentation. That would be when I say town sewer, right? And we get ready for a town sewer and it comes up and we find out at the last minute there's a septic system there. Then that's me being negligent and misrepresenting it. When you take a listing and you plug it in, it populates through public records. Okay? You should check those facts. And you guys are all going to learn about this on a scavenger hunt on Friday. However, because sometimes they're wrong. So my dad and I took a listing. Because I did this wrong too. So we got a listing together and I gave him the listing, right? And so in showing him how to do it, I populated it and sent him off. There's your listing. Go list it. Go do it, right? So the heat was not what I said it was. And there was another big one. There were two big things that he was negligently misrepresenting it because.
Siding.
Thank you. The siding. Okay. Thank you, Sonia. All right. So, anyways, because I was shortcutting it and I didn't follow through.
Well, no, I helped him with the open house stuff. And
Yeah.
I showed him.
Yeah, and he kept on going, and he was sitting there, right? I gave him the listing, and he's going, yeah, and she didn't tell me that either. Yeah, and she said that. Yeah, and I was going like, excuse me, I can hear you, you know.
Yeah, he was.
Was it?
He was totally throwing you under the
So, anyways, fraudulent. So this is easy to do. Okay, I'm not a bad person. All right, many people don't check. Okay. I didn't even know I was supposed to check until right this second, okay? No. So anyways, disclosures, things that you need to disclose. Environmental hazards, property conditions, stigmatized properties, and Megan's Law. Okay, so we'll get some stories about this too. All right, so environmental hazards. If you know of anything that you know, I don't know, there's a lot of things that come up. If you saw mold in the attic or whatever, like any property things, you should either point out to them or get them to make sure that they understand it. Okay, in commercial properties, it might be, you know, oil spills or whatever. There's a bunch of things. Property conditions. You know, you go in like a basement, right? And this is back when you were a customer. You had buyer customers, and you go in the basement, and there's like a big ring all around the whole entire basement of like rust. And the seller's agent says to you, this is a dry basement, right? And now you have the customer, right? So who do you represent? You represent the seller back then, even though, so you have this customer relationship. So do you point out that ring around it, or do you just hope that they don't see it? Do you keep pointing out things up here, you know? So anyways, property conditions. You want to make sure that you disclose what you know about the property. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to Massachusetts. You have to. Are you waving to me? Okay. That's just going like, move it along.
No,
move it along.
I wasn't.
You got 2 more chapters to go before you let him home. Yes, Sonia?
That wasn't me.
I have a question. I don't know if this is where you're going with. What if you had the listing previously,
Yeah.
you lost the listing, but now you have a buyer for it? Can you disclose, what can you disclose?
Material facts.
Okay.
Some material facts about the property, because back to my bell ringing, you cannot unring a bell, right? So if you saw, okay, so let's go back to my water in the basement. I was showing a property, right? And so we're looking, we see like some staining. So we say to the listing agent, has there been water down here? She goes, well, I've never seen any. So now we're standing up, like against like the wall where there's some water coming in. It is spitting in her face, right? And so I say, so my friend, who's like my client, who's my friend, says, well, there is water. And she goes, I've never seen any. And she's like, it's hitting you in the face. Like, you know, there's water down here. But like, you know, that's an extreme example, but that is a true example from a little while ago. That is a material condition that you need to say. You know, if you know of something, in that particular case, like if that spit in her face, the next time that she showed that property, if someone said, has there been water, she would have to tell them, yes, I have seen water down here. Like this, you know. So. Stigmatized properties. There's a whole list of stigmatized properties that actually covers in Massachusetts, mostly what their laws are, so we'll save it for that chapter. But stigmatized properties are things that have happened to that property. You know, some things talk about like, was there a death in the house? Is there a sex offender living there or in the neighborhood? There's a bunch of little things that would make that property stigmatized. Okay, my favorite is there a ghost in the house? Right? Because you have to disclose, if someone told you there were ghosts in the house and someone asks you if there were ghosts in the house, you have to say, the people here believe that there were ghosts in the house. So anyways, I was making fun of this rule before I started teaching this class so much. And these Malaysian people came in and they're very, very about ghosts. And so it was an older house and they said, you know, are there ghosts in the house? Of course they can't talk, so they're like translating through and so the person says, they want to know if there's ghosts in the house. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right, you know, whatever. You know, no, there's no ghosts in the house. So I think I'm so funny now. Someone comes and relieves me at the open house. I go around the corner, I'm driving down, and I see that the owners are actually out on a walk. And so, of course, I think this is so funny, like, because, you know, these people want, you know, I'm like, They want to know if there's ghosts in the house. And they go, yeah, there are. I'm like, shit! Turn around, drive back, and I'm like, funny you should say that about the ghosts. They actually do believe that there's ghosts in the house. So, yeah. So, because I didn't know that because it never came up in conversation until I was asked. But, so you have to do, so you have to go and tell them about ghosts. There are some things that, there's a whole list, and we'll get into it later, about, like, what you have to disclose. But there's ways to do it to protect you as well as your clients. But, you definitely have to do that. And then Megan's Law is what? That's sex offenders. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of protections that are out there for sex offenders and discrimination and all that kind of stuff. So there's a fine line. So what we always say to people is, or what we try to say to them is, please go visit the sex offender registry in this town so that you can find out where they may be living. Plus, they live right next door. You don't want to get in trouble with them, but you want them to know it. And it's serious. And I'll tell you how sensitive people are to this is that, and Mariah can share this with me. I sold some land right up the road from our house. And about like a month after I sold the land, because now this woman was so happy at the closing. She was crying and hugging me. Her dream was coming true. Oh my God, kiss, 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 love you, right? And you actually know the family too, so can't look at you either. So anyways, so a sex offender moves in next door to where their land is that they just bought. So I think she called me and said, do you know what happened next door? Or do you know who's there? Do you know who's next door? I say, no, who's next door? A sex offender's moved in. Right? Now, you don't think that with 2 young daughters and a son that I'm going to care that a sex offender moved in? How could you sell me some land with a sex offender? And, you are the worst. And they said, he wasn't there then. People care. So what I'm saying, my point is here is that, you may think like, I don't have to tell them that. They didn't ask me about that. I don't know that for sure. I've never seen the person. I don't want to go there. But they're going to blame you for whatever you don't tell them. Okay? So you need to figure out how you're going to do that and how you're going to respond as a professional, okay? I have like one buyer's agent friend who like his thing is like, I tell everybody where the sex offenders are. Like that's his thing. Like you work with me, you'll know where everything is. Every crime around you, you'll know where it is.
Yeah. I got a story to.
Okay.
At a house, it was in Taunton. A buyer lived the house, young couple. They're gonna start their family. I was there early one morning. I was walking my dog around the neighborhood. There was this house that looked like a daycare with swing sets and picnic tables. So I said, oh, beautiful, you're gonna start a family? He goes over there, it turns out it was a home for juvenile sex offenders that the court couldn't release in public. But there was like 10 or 12 juvenile offenders over there. We're all in agreement. Luckily the attorney could get them out of it. There was another thing. But so you don't always know what's around. I had to tell him.
Hey, Marie?
Yeah.
So then you had to break their heart. Can you up me again? This is the weirdest thing. I don't know if like we're just getting dropped or something. Yeah, but they're very sensitive about that. People don't want. So I had a cousin who moved in right next to a sex offender. Was using me, got a little deal, like that they got a deal that they did. So they dumped me and they went straight to the homeowner. And a sex offender was next door, and they're like, "Why didn't you tell me?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" So anyway, but you want to try to do what you can. Thank you very, very much. So weird how it does that.
Yeah.
Well, look at my little words
Yeah, I
there.
don't know where that came from. That's new, because that's underlined, so it wasn't on my screen. Yeah.
That must have been what I just typed when I was looking to try to get it back on again.
I'm gonna delete it.
That's the name of the sex offender.
Right. Well, he's
Okay,
fine.
so beyond this unit, you're gonna do everything you do every time, okay? And I'm actually gonna skip the quizzes on this because I want to go to the state part that corresponds with this while we're on the subject. Does that sound okay? So I have a pinky swear that you guys are gonna do it because we should be able to get it in. Yep. Any questions on that?
Chapter 1 and 2.
The only question I have, in that situation with like the ghost nonsense, like the sex offenders, suppose this deal does go through, the house is sold or whatever, and it comes out in the wash after the fact, are they just stuck with the house?
Are they stuck with it?
Say you sold the house to the ghost people, and then it came out like right after the closing, so they technically have the house.
Well, they never about ghosts.
Yeah,
most
like,
of the stigmatized properties is you don't have. I mean, if you don't, first of all, if you don't know it, you can't. case law to say that if you didn't know, you didn't know.
Well,
Like,
what
you
I'm
know,
trying to get at is like, when you buy a lemon car, you can kind of get out of it after you've made
Yeah.
the purchase. Is that applicable with real
not really,
estate?
not really.
Once you're in, you're in.
You sell it again, so you get another deal, you know, but, no, they don't, I don't know people that have unsold their houses.
You can't lemon law a house.
You can't lemon law a house, to my knowledge. That could be a whole new, industry for you though. I smell opportunity. Okay, so,
For the top, sorry.
is it-
I wasn't trying to push you guys through.
Yeah, she wanted me to start right in the middle.
I wanted to make sure that it was the right
Okay.
one. and
So we're gonna cover a lot of the same stuff, so I'm just gonna touch on the things that, so, that was the general law, so now we're just gonna talk about the things that are specific to Massachusetts, okay, anything that has to do with that. We have the same thing, real estate brokers and real estate
Chapter
sales.
1 in the red book.
Chapter one,
Sorry,
alright.
chapter 1. Yeah,
chapter
chapter
one.
1.
Chapter one,
Yeah,
yes.
they swap back, it's not in any set order.
This is why I was
Chapter
telling
one in the
whoever
red
asked,
book.
like, you know, who has to miss some things, like, you can make it up, whatever, it's not exactly chronological.
Remember what I said in the red book, if you ever wanna see where you're at, can I borrow this for 1 second? When you're studying at home, in the red book, the first page, behind the first page, it tells you what units it coincides with. So you're looking at the modern real estate practice section, and it tells you on the left what it goes with.
Okay, so the law of agency, we talked about that, defines the duties and responsibilities between the real estate agent and the consumer. The relationship between the principal, buyer and seller, right? And the agent results in a contract, from a contract of employment. They basically hire you to do that. When an agency relationship is created, the principal is called the client. Agents work for clients. A customer is the third party for whom some level of service is provided. Agents work with customers, okay? I just want to say, like, we used to think, like, when I was talking about that, like, that menu of services thing and just kind of helping the people with certain different things, we thought, let's keep them customers, right? Because customers are a lot less, like, there's less liability, there's less everything. And what we determined was, it's really difficult if you are active to stay in a customer relation, like, in a customer level. You start doing agency, client-related things for them. They call you and they ask you things and you answer the questions and you've established that client relationship. So, you know, you want to make sure you're disclosing whatever your relationship is. Just come over here. Get comfy. Okay, agency relationship can be created in one of 3 ways: by written agreement, by oral agreement, or by implications. Although Mass does not require a listing agreement or a buyer agency agreement to be in writing, we talked about that, good business practices dictate the use of a signed listing and buyer contract. Okay, so you should, okay? And company policy may say that you must. Okay, fiduciaries, duties of an agent, old car, we talked about that. Disclosure of brokerage relationship. Okay, we talked about this. First personal meeting, discussing with a prospective buyer or seller a specific property. So, I've had people in this class at this stage of the game go like, all right, so like what if I'm at a barbecue? Because people ask you about real estate all the time. Right? What if I'm at a barbecue and someone asks me about my new listing? Am I really supposed to pull out an agency disclosure? You are. Okay, obviously you're not going to. You know, but what I will recommend you do is on your iPad is get a blank agency disclosure and know how to use like the Adobe kind of sign the thing. So like if you really are talking to somebody about it seriously and you're in a situation that's not quite barbecue but might be a little bit more of a thing, you're able to do an agency disclosure at any point in time. If you're driving in your car and someone says, hey, I'm right out in front of your house, your listing, can you come right now? And you can, right? And you don't have the paperwork. Dave saved me yesterday. He had it right in his little thing when I was going. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have an agency disclosure. And he's like, I got one right here. I carry them with me all the time, right? He does it with paper, and which is good. I also recommend you have it available on your iPad so that you can have people sign it right there. Okay, with their little finger. It's kind of fun. They think it's cool. Back to that little e-signing. You look like you're really smart, you know. Traditional business agency model, we talked about that. That's when the office shares the listings of one kind or another. Designated agency business model, that's what we practice here, where people are designated. And open house disclosure requirements. Okay, so I was just talking about when you need that agency disclosure, right? And you do not need it for an open house. Like you do not need to have an agency disclosure to talk to the people when you're showing at an open house. The idea is that at an open house, it's less formal. That person is either dropping in. There's so many people there. You don't have that time to establish that kind of relationship. However, you do need to tell the people at that open house, who it is that you're representing, okay, and how you're representing them. So there'll be a disclosure form that is bigger than other things, supposedly, or more obvious than other notes that are there, that says, okay, Sonia's getting one for me to show you. Thank you, Sonia. So this would be one of the ones that you would have, and this says, welcome to our open house. And in the words, it says that, please let me know if you're working with a buyer's agent. The realtor here is currently a designated seller's agent. Okay, it tells you what to do if you want to proceed with the selling of the house. Okay, now if I am doing an open house for Dave's listing, I would not say that I'm a designated agent because I was never designated for that. I would be, in that case, a non-agent. We didn't talk about non-agent. That'll come up though. So thank you. So that is what you do at an open house. Okay, open houses are kind of tricky, and we'll talk about them at some point in time, like the purpose of an open house to a realtor and what you need to do in order to maximize your safety, your compliance, and also your business. Okay, types of agency relationship. Okay, seller's agent, we talked about that. You did a listing agreement with a seller. You have a seller's agreement with them, hopefully with consent for dual, and you're trying to sell their house. Buyer's agent, you have a buyer agency agreement with them, or not, but you should. Okay, and you are doing the same thing. You're the Fido biting dog for the buyer. A single agency means that you're only representing one side. You're a single agent. Okay, a single agency could be like a buyer's agency that only does buyers. Okay, disclosed dual agent means that you've had that consent. And the one thing I didn't tell you about is that once you have consented to it, okay, and so now it actually happens. You know, I told Tim when I took him at his listing, I had a great guy for this, and the guy I've shown the 85 houses to, I now give them both notice that when we put this transaction together, that we have a disclosed dual agency. Okay, so first they gave consent, and now I'm giving them notice, and then everybody signs on that. So there's no questions. There's 2 documents of dual agency in every file, whether it's an electronic file or a paper file, on each dual agent. Okay? A sub-agent, and this is where this all kind of started. This is what started everything being confused. When I started in real estate, we practiced as sub-agents, and it meant at that time we were a seller agency state. Everybody worked for the seller, right? Everybody worked for the seller. Everybody had the seller on their shoulders. Okay, so when an agent brought in a buyer, they had a customer relationship with the buyer. Even if they've been working with that person for a long time, it was a customer relationship. So what that meant was when I'm showing my customer buyer around the house, and I see this great big crack in the ceiling, right? Or water dripping, spitting on my face, or that ring around the basement, or any of those things, I can't point them out to him because the seller's on my shoulder. Okay, and the seller would not want me to do that. The seller would want him to discover those on his own, if he did. All right, so I have to work for the seller. So that's the first thing that was kind of twisted about it, was that that's not how it worked, because hi Paula, you wanted to help this person. I mean, they're your guy. Like, you feel like they're your guy, right? So that's the first thing. The second is, you as a seller, we used to say like, and not only do you get me, you get my whole office trying to sell your property. I'm talking about sub-agency, right? And didn't we say that? Not only do you get me, you get the whole office trying to sell your property. Well, great. So there's this thing called vicarious liability, which means that whoever that person is, that sub-agent that's talking for you, whatever they say is you talking, right? So let's say I'm showing the house, and you tell me, oh my God, I love this house, but I just really wish like all the walls were purple. And I say, I'm sure the seller would do that. I've now entered a contract that seller now has to paint all those walls purple for you, okay, because of vicarious liability. Hardwood floors, oh my God, I hate carpet. This has to be perfect with hardwood floors. They'll do that for you. You don't know if they'll do it for them. You don't know what their ideas are, but you've committed them because through vicarious liability, they're responsible for whatever you say. So what we decided back about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe not actually longer than that now, gosh, it's been, okay, so 10 to 12, well, longer than 10, because this business is 10 years old. So like 12 or 13 years ago, right? They said both of those things are twisted, okay? If you're working with a buyer, that should be a buyer-client relationship, and sellers don't want people all talking for them. So let's stop with sub-agency, and let's go with single agency. Buyers and sellers each have their own client relationships. Okay, so every listing that you plug into MLS is going to say sub-agency allowed, and you're going to go, nope, okay? It took some companies a while before they would actually say this because they didn't know exactly what they were saying, but it's been going on for a long, long time. Okay, facilitator or non-agent. So this, on paper, to me, looks like the best ever, because you're like the connector. You know, you're a facilitator. You don't give agency responsibilities. You're not responsible for anyone. You just make the connection. You make it about the transaction, and you don't enter into the agreement. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Okay. Now, I can't be the listing agent for you, and then bring in a buyer and go like, I know, I'll just be like a facilitator for them. You can't be an agent for one and a non-agent for the other. Okay, that doesn't work that way. It's either non-agent, or agency. Okay, in this situation. I mean, it could be you're the agent for somebody and I'm a facilitator, but it can't be that I'm both. You know what I mean? That's not how you answer that dual question. Okay, we don't very often have non-agent stuff of facilitators. We don't like them either when it comes time to like when an agent brings a buyer in. We want them to have agency responsibilities for them because we don't want them to not have any of the liability and any of the responsibilities and us to have it when they're the person that's their guy. You know what I mean? So, facilitated non-agent, designated buyers or sellers agent. So we talked about that. Same. Okay, now we get a couple others in here. Okay, death or insanity of the buyer's or seller's agent or client principal. So if there's any insanity going on, you could terminate it also. Okay, that's always a tricky one. Like, what do they mean by that? Impossibility to perform, if that's the same. Incapacity, mentally incapable, or bankruptcy of either party. Breach by one of the parties. Okay, so they've thrown a couple extra words in there. Agent. Okay, compensation. The real estate broker works under the contractual agreement with his employer. In Massachusetts, it may be created in one of three ways: orally, in writing, or by implication when the broker and seller behave as if they have an agreement. Okay, so for a long time, as buyer's agents, you know, we saw what it was on MLS. We kind of knew what our companies did with each other. So we never asked, like, what are you going to do with us? How are you going to pay us? Like, what are you going to pay us? You know, because we thought that was kind of being forward, you know. So we don't really do that anymore. We've worked through that, and we try to make it, you know, clear. Okay? And again, the statute of frauds requires a written agreement that applies to the conveyance of the property, but it does not to the employment agreements. Okay? What that means is that in order for a contract to be binding, whether it's an offer to purchase or a purchase and sales agreement, they need to be signed by both parties. Okay? So I can't call you and say, I have a buyer who's willing to pay $300,000 for that. And you can't say, that's great. Okay? That's not binding. Our conversation is not binding. Okay? It has to be signed. Okay? Okay, it says here, note, however, that an exclusive right to sell listing agreement must be in writing to be enforceable in court. Okay, so what that means is, who was telling me the story earlier about they had a listing and the seller found their own buyer and tried to get out of it. It was in another room, never mind. But what it was in order for it to be binding, for you to get that commission, it has to be in writing. Okay, so I could take your listing, you could say, hey, can you throw my house on the market? And I could do that. That's legal. Right? But then say you go and you sell it yourself. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, you hired me to sell your house. You can go, well, yeah, but I never signed anything. Okay? And he would not, because of the statute of frauds, he would not have to pay me. Okay, that's why it's stupid to have a vote. Well, first of all, they just told us that it's not, but that's why it's stupid to do it this way. Okay. So, any questions on that? Okay. Tristram's Landing versus Waite. Okay, Tristram's Landing is one of the landmark cases, is that the broker is entitled to a commission only when the following three conditions are met. The broker produces a purchaser ready, willing, and able to buy on the terms fixed by the owner. the purchaser enters into a binding contract with the owner to purchase the property, and the purchaser completes the transaction by closing the title in accordance with the provisions of the contract. Under a brokerage agreement, the real estate broker is entitled to a commission from the seller only if these three requirements are met. This is called the Tristram's Landing Rule. I'm trying to remember what happened in that case. Okay, so I think what that has to do with was the broker brought a ready, willing, and able buyer, and then the seller decided not to sell it. I'm not sure though. I'd have to go back and check that. That'll be my homework. Okay, procuring cause. We talked about procuring cause, right? The broker needs to demonstrate that he was efficient, effective, and final cause of force on bringing about that actual sale. Okay, so all those thresholds I told you about, those would all be things that would be considered to see who was the efficient, effective, final cause. Okay? Multiple commissions. When one broker is the procuring cause and another broker succeeds in getting the seller and the buyer to sign the sales contract, the owner could end up having to pay more than one commission. Okay, so this would have to be, I think our language on our contracts prevents this from happening, but it does it because of this, that, you know, by our procuring cause doctrine, but also by the who it says gets the money thing that's in the contract. Sometimes they're different, but I'm pretty sure that our paperwork precludes that. Okay, an attachment. When the broker is entitled to a commission and the seller refuses to pay, a writ of attachment may be filed against the seller's property. An attachment is a legal writ or proceeding by which the property is made subject to a lien pending, or lease pending, right? Isn't that what our word was for that? Pending the outcome of the suit. So theoretically, they're saying that they're going to hold up the sale of the property because they're not going to pay the person. Consumer protection law. Okay. In addition to the obligations placed on the broker by a fiduciary relationship, Massachusetts brokers must comply with the provisions of Mass Consumer Protection Act, Mass General Law 93A. So you'll hear a lot in the course of your profession, 93A. It's huge. We are a consumer protection state, okay? So it used to be caveat emptor, which was let the buyers beware, right? We are not a let the buyers beware state, okay? We are a buyer protection state. And it says the MC outlaws unfair, deceptive acts or practices in conducting any trade or commerce, including advertising, offering for sale, rent or lease, or selling, renting, leasing, or distributing any service or property, whether real or personal, tangible or intangible. Okay, in addition to this statement of liability, it also gives these specifics. Making false claims about the product's construction, durability, safety, or strength. False claims concerning the ease in which a product can be repaired or maintained. Making false claims about financing terms or availability. Advertising that something has quality, value, or usability that does not. Substituting different goods than those advertised. They call that bait and switch. And offering guarantees without disclosing the nature and extent of the guarantees. So those are some of the things under 93A. Okay, and this is the piece of affirmative disclosure that goes with that 93A, which is the answer, I guess, or the response to the caveat emptor, okay? Which is equally important under this is the broker's duty to disclose all facts relating to the sale. In the past, sellers and brokers were required under common law to disclose only defects they knew about that could not be discovered in normal inspection of the premises. Now, however, it is illegal to fail to disclose to a buyer or prospective buyer any fact that might influence the buyer or prospective buyer not to enter the transaction, whether or not the buyer requests the information. So a lot of times, and this happens a lot of times when a deal falls apart, you know, and in the course of it falling apart, you learn something about that property. And then comes the next person along. What do you have to tell them, and how do you have to tell them it? You know, and there's a lot of realtors who will go like, you know what? For home inspection, I'm just sitting at that kitchen table reading my paper. I don't want to know anything about this house. And we're laughing because we've seen that happen. And it's like, okay, you don't want to know anything about that house because you can't unring that bell. Because once you know it, you know it. You know. So, and there's some ridiculous stories I could tell you. about people who, what extents they would go to say that they don't know something, right? So what I'm telling you is that this is what our law is. Massachusetts is very strong on protecting the consumers. It would behoove you to be able to figure out how you're going to work your business around that. Home inspection law, real estate agents are prohibited from making direct referrals. Okay, sellers agents are prohibited from making direct referrals. Upon request, they may provide assistance in the buyer in accessing the information on licensed home inspectors, including providing a complete list of home inspectors. So as a seller's agent, you are not allowed to give a referral for a buyer, for a home inspector. You're supposed to give either the list or refer them to the website or something like that. Buyer's agents are allowed to tell or to suggest a home inspector, okay? Persons affected by the law is all listing, selling, cooperating brokers, and salespeople affiliated. Sellers, developers, and builders also come under the Act's authority. However, the law does not apply to those who sell their houses privately. Okay, so this talks about the enforcement of this, okay? The first thing is a 30-day demand letter. And then damages, if the consumer rejects the offer and the court finds that it was indeed a reasonable offer, they may recover no more than that amount. Recommendations, again, if you know of any problems or discover one during inspection, they must disclose it. The broker is not required to conduct any investigations of property that is beyond their level of competence. Okay, so I just had a scenario this year where there was a door that leaked, and I was the buyer's agent, right? So the seller did not tell the buyer that the door leaked in heavy rains, right? The seller's agent didn't tell us. It wasn't raining for the home inspection. You know, it was not obvious to us, you know? So none of us knew. So don't you know, the night of the closing, we have these heavy rains and it's leaking inside. So my guy is like, I am going to prove a point. I am suing everybody. I'm like, we didn't know. All right, so what's our duty to know? You know, so here's the thing he says to me when he talked to his lawyer, because he was really going to do this. The person who was going to get in trouble for this were the businesses. The people that they said that they could sue would either be the real estate companies or the home inspector who didn't notice it. Okay, the consumer, like consumer to consumer, that was not who they would, that lawyer said was who they could sue. So I'm like, so you would really sue me for a door? And then I also said, you'd sue this other person for a door? Like, seriously? You know, and anyways, it ended up that, well, I'm not going to tell you how it ended up because another lousy story. Okay, so anyways, recommendations. What?
Katie bought a door.
I wish that was it because that would be legal. Okay, recommendations. If the broker knows of a problem and discovers one during an inspection, he must disclose that information to the buyer, a prospective buyer, identify its source, and state whether or not he has verified it. Okay, when a broker makes any sort of claim or representation, he should disclose both the source and whether or not he has made the attempt to personally verify the information. A broker cannot be held responsible for the truthfulness of the claims if he has not tried to verify them. However, if the broker has tried to verify the claims that could be used for verification, he must say so. The broker is not required to conduct any investigation of the property that is beyond their level of competence. So there's a whole big thing about what that agent should have known. You know, and this one had to, the case law that, I don't think they cite it, but the case law that had to do with was this person sold a house across the street from a school that had oil leak or something. And so the contaminated soils, or could be contaminated soils. And so the person that bought the house sued everybody because they could have been damaged by the soil. And what they actually found was that there was no damage, and so there was no case. You have to be harmed by it, you know. So, you know, my guy was harmed by it, rain. But anyway, the sex offender law. We talked about this again. At low risk is classified 1, moderate risk is 2, and high risk is 3. Again, your best bet, even if you sit down at the computer with them and say, let's go check out the sex offender registry. Do not be the source of the source, okay? Let them tap it out, let them go there, let them find it, okay? Same thing with when people say, is this a safe neighborhood? Puffing says, oh yeah, so safe, right? So they move in and there's like gunshots or something. You don't want to do that, but what you would say is, go by this neighborhood several times at different times of day on different days to see what you consider safe. Okay, do not be the source of the source. Okay, so this is, any person who receives, stores, or maintains or processes personal information must have a policy, a written information security program, or called WISP, in place to protect it. So each company has like what they would do with like checks that have like, you know, the Merck line on them, you know, what you do with those. And every company has to have a policy on what they do with like that secured information. It's supposed to be private. I know everybody, all my agents go like this, like what the hell's ours? But anyways, we have one, secret. No, just kidding. Okay, so here's, turn that thing off. No, all right. So personal information. This just talks about what some of those personal information things would be. Social, driver's license, financial account numbers, credit card numbers, security information. Again, you don't want to be the source of the source if you don't have to be, right? So if you're taking a loan application, not a loan, for rentals, right? Don't take all this information for them. You know, don't get all that. You don't want to have it. You know, there's such thing as, I don't know, it's just that you're exposing yourself to liability. There's all sorts of companies out there that will do all the credit stuff for you. Someone asked me that, they said, but do you check credit? Or do you do background checks? I'm like, I have never checked credit and I've never done a background check myself. You know, because I don't want to be the source of the source. Breach of information. Okay, so this is saying, again, I'm going to scoot it right down. Mass General Law 93H says that any person or business that has reason to know of a breach in security must file a written notice with the Attorney General. These are new questions on the test. This is what people have come back to me and said, what the hell's WISP? You know? So this is one of the questions that's on there, especially for you brokers. You know, the second is in accordance with the Section 4 of Chapter 93A. It's a violation, allows the Attorney General to bring action against the person or business to cure any violation of this chapter and for any other relief that may be appropriate. Okay, so this is important for you guys. Okay. Here's the information for that you can check it out. Okay. I was like, yes, beyond this unit. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to do all the same things, okay?